story of the innkeeper comes from one small verse. Luke chapter 2, verse 7. The words are simple. They don't tell us a lot about the innkeeper. But they communicate the world to us about who God is and who Jesus is. The verse reads this way. She gave birth to her first child, a son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. Why? Why did Luke include these verses or those words? He didn't have to leave it in, did he? Luke didn't have to include that phrase, there was no lodging for them. He could have left that detail out. I believe that Luke included that for a couple of reasons, but the phrase that comes to mind is this. Each one of us is an innkeeper who decides if there is room for Jesus in our lives. If there's room for Jesus in our lives. Now, you've all stayed in a hotel before, right? Anybody here who has not stayed in a hotel before? You stayed at least in the Motel 6, or maybe you stayed in the No-Tell Motel one time. I stayed in a motel one time on the way home from Lexington, Kentucky. About the time I left, I got suddenly very sick. I was nauseous. I actually stopped and, well, there's no other word, threw up. And I knew I wasn't going to make the 7-hour trip back to Carrollton, Georgia. And so I stopped at a cheap little hotel. I walked in, pale, white, sweaty. The lady at the cash register probably thought I was coming off of some kind of addiction and needed a hotel room. She gave me the room. The only thing outside of my room I could see was the interstate massage parlor and the customers who were coming and going. The room had red carpet. The sink was cracked. The TV barely worked. And I was sick. And I remember the crack in that sink because I visited that sink a lot. But I spent the night there. The next day, I was a little better and I made my way home. I was very, very thankful for that room. Even under those circumstances, I was thankful for that room. But Mary and Joseph went into Bethlehem. And there was no room for them in the inn. And you know all they wanted? Back in their day, there were no cute little soaps. There wasn't a shower. There wasn't a TV, even if it didn't work. There was no sink with a crack in it. All they wanted was 4 walls, a dirt floor, a roof, and a fire pit to cook some food with. And the other very important thing in ancient hotels, because there were no cars, was a place to keep your animals. But there was no room in the inn. And we don't know if the innkeeper was a mean person or a nice person. We don't know if he just said no and sent them away. Or we don't know if he did everything he could to help host them. But whatever the circumstances, Mary and Joseph ended up not in a dirt floor room, but they ended up in the place where they kept the animals. They ended up not far from the donkey that they rode over on. Mary was very, very pregnant. Do you know what manger means? Technically? Does anybody know what a manger is? Are you brave enough? What? It's the place you actually eat from. So when the Bible says that Jesus was laid in a manger, Jesus was laid in the place that the animals ate from. So our depiction here with hay is very, very accurate. You can imagine a donkey or a cow or a horse coming up and eating hay out of the manger. I think we know this for at least a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is this. God wanted to make it very clear in the birth of Jesus Christ that Jesus is for all people. The least and lowly and lonely among us. And if we feel like we are the least and lowly and lonely, then Jesus is for us. Not a certain class of people, not a certain status, not with a certain talent, but for all people. I think the second reason is this. From the beginning, Jesus was not completely at home here on earth. See, there was no room for Jesus in the end, and in so many places in our world, as we look around it, there's no room for Jesus. You see, Jesus didn't come to be admired for his cuteness. You know, I have a new little niece. She was born just a few weeks ago. We tried to talk her mother out of it, but she named our little niece Dixie Cash. And Dixie Cash is as cute as she can be. In fact, just an hour or two ago, she was in my house falling asleep on her very first Christmas Eve. Jesus didn't come to stay all cute like that, did he? Jesus ultimately came to transform and to change the world. And Jesus' purpose created conflict. Because Jesus came ultimately to change what was or is evil into what is righteous. What is bad into what is good. What is dark into what is light. What is polluted into what is pure. What is profane into what is holy. And on this night, what is naughty into what is nice. I saw 2 Cokes on the shelf today. You know how they have those words on them? One of them said naughty, and the other one said nice. And it was a little bit of a choice as to which one I was going to pick up and take home. But since I was preaching tonight, I chose the nice one. I'm kidding. Well, Jesus is never really welcome on this earth, except in the hearts and in the lives of people who intentionally invite him into their life. You see, even in Matthew 8, verse 20, we find that foxes had dens, that birds had nests, but that Jesus, the Son of God, had no place to lay his head. This earth is not his home. But our hearts are. Because our hearts and the lives we lead are building a kingdom come. Are bringing heaven to earth. As we say in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And with our political systems and our social systems and our personal desires and needs and wants and our ambitions, that can create conflict. You see, each one of us is an innkeeper who decides if there is room for Jesus. But it's so easy. It's so easy, especially in today's world, I think, to invite the wrong things into our lives. To be an innkeeper who welcomes the people or the experiences or the things that actually are not healthy from us and would drive us away from good and toward bad, would drive us away from nice and toward naughty, would help us pick up the wrong coat at the grocery store. Right? We make a decision. For us adults, us big kids, many times those things look like lust, gossip, greed, selfish ambition, gluttony. Well, I'm not above mistakes. I'm so thankful that in the midst of my mistakes, in the midst of my lust and greed and gluttony, that God forgives. I'm thankful that He brought Jesus Christ into my life. Somebody in our culture made a pretty big mistake lately. What's been in the news about somebody making a mistake? Miss Universe! There we go. Exactly. How many of you knew Steve Harvey before Miss Universe? Oh yeah, okay. He's a pretty, you guys watch game shows, I guess. Comedians. Have you seen? Were you watching it? Actually, my girls were watching Miss Universe, and we came in and said, let's watch a movie. And it was right before they were about to crown the queen. And when I said, well, I know Miss So-and-so is going to win, and we turned it off. We missed like the event of this month, And we turned it off. And then the next morning, one of my girls says, well, we really shouldn't have turned that off last night. But have you seen that? It's just so painful. Poor Miss Columbia, the crown is on her head, and she, like a beauty queen, she is proud, I won. And then Steve Harvey comes out and he says, ladies and gentlemen, I made a mistake. And he announces that Miss Philippines is Miss Universe. The problem is Miss Columbia doesn't understand English, so she doesn't know what's going on. She's still, And Miss Philippines doesn't know what to do either. She walks up just shut like, okay, I guess I'll walk out there. And then they literally take the crown one lady to the other. Jesus is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He's our Savior. It's so easy in our life for us to crown the wrong things. To crown the things that would compete with Jesus, that would take Jesus from us, that would blind us to the love of Jesus, that would keep us from knowing the fullness, which is so easy to do. Well, you see, we reach the end of our own heart. And Jesus desires to live in that heart. In fact, Revelation 3:20 tells us that Jesus knocks. And that if we open up, He'll come in and dine with us. Well, weren't we stunned by Steve Harvey's integrity? Hasn't that been part of the discussion this week? Well, Steve Harvey, he came right out and did exactly what he had to do, and he didn't blame the producers, and he didn't blame the teleprompter, and he didn't blame the card that's been passed around on the internet. He just said, made a mistake. At some point in Steve Harvey's life, he made room for Jesus Christ. Did you know that? In fact, at one point in his life, at an event, he gave an introduction. He gave a Jesus introduction. He said, here's who Jesus is. And I wanted you to see that. It's a whole lot better than that painful footage from this universe. This is good stuff, y'all. I don't know what strikes me. What a wonderful introduction to Jesus Christ. Do you know He's on every church fan in America? But it's not enough just to know about the introduction. And it's not enough just to know that Jesus is knocking. We have to invite Jesus into our life, into our heart. We're each an innkeeper who decides if there is room in the inn. You know, Christmas is Jesus' birthday. And earlier, kids' worship service were actually saying happy birthday to Jesus. I'm not going to do that right now, but I had a time in my life where we got Jesus a birthday cake. And my 3 kids, they were not as tall as the pulpit here. And we sang happy birthday to Jesus. And we blew out the candles and we cut the cake. And then my son, who was a concrete thinker at the time, he said, "Dad, if it's Jesus' birthday, then why isn't Jesus here?" Pretty good question, right? I said, "Well, son, Jesus lives in heaven, and we're just celebrating his birthday today." He thought about it for a little bit, and then he comes back to me, and he says, "Dad, if Jesus knocks on our door, I will let him come in our house." And I said, "That's good, son. I think you got the point. I think you got the point." I hope my prayer is that Jesus would be knocking on the door of each of our hearts tonight. There might even be someone here tonight who Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart for the very first time. And heaven absolutely celebrates every time we open the door and allow Jesus room in our inn, in our heart, in our life. Isn't that what faith is about? Jesus living in and through us. In a moment, we'll share communion together. And as we do, you'll be invited to come and receive those elements and spend a little time at the altar this evening. And I want to invite you during those moments on Christmas Eve 2015 to make sure that there's room in the inn of your heart. If you would find a hymn, there's some in front of you. Turn to page 15. The bread and the juice